Hey there, let's talk about how you can work with layers effectively. Let's start with a blank canvas and then we'll move to another tab. The first thing you may want to do is delete this background layer. It's currently locked, but it allows partial editing. I can paint over it, I can erase parts of it, but I can't move it. Plus, maybe you want a transparent background to begin with. The command to remove a layer is the Delete key on Windows or the Backspace key on a Mac. You can press it, but you'll notice nothing happens, and that's because Photoshop needs at least one layer in any project. It can be an empty layer, but you can't have a project with nothing inside this panel. So let's add one from the bottom right side. This is the icon that creates a new layer. Click once and a new one has just popped up. Now I can switch to this other one and delete it even though it bears the lock icon. Great. If you don't want to move your mouse cursor all the way down, you can use the hotkey Ctrl-Shift-N to create a new layer. This does the same thing, but it also shows you this window through which you can adjust various settings. My advice is to click on this small icon since it's faster. Your project should be properly organized, so let's double-click its name. Now it's selected, you can write whatever you want. This is how you rename all layers in Photoshop. What's nice is that you can give multiple layers the same title and Photoshop won't complain. Please note that if you double-click anywhere outside its name, you'll get this pop-up window. If that's the case, press Escape and try again. This usually happens if your layer name has very few characters. Same thing applies if you click twice on its thumbnail. This isn't what you're looking for. Okay, let's switch tabs. On this lovely image, I want to add a message in this top right corner. And that begs the question, when is it the right time to create a new layer? Bear with me as I'll explain in a second. First, I'll write something with my brush tool. Please don't focus on the actual techniques, as the point of this lecture is to use layers effectively. Okay, now I have this handwritten message, but I'll also add some hearts into the mix. Nothing special, I'm just doodling here. Finally, I'll add some random lines to further embellish this area. Now I'm done, but I'm not happy. See the problem? Because I didn't create another layer, I'm now stuck. Furthermore, I also permanently marked this image because I performed all my edits directly on it. That's bad practice, and you should always avoid adjustments this way. If I try to erase my work, look what happens. That does more harm. Press F12 to revert back to the original project. Here's how you should approach things. First, it's best you have an idea about what you want to do. You don't need to be precise, but you should have at least a general direction in mind. Based on that, you can make some key decisions regarding when it's best to create a new layer. I'll do that now and I'll write my message. I have my first part done, but I'll create a new one for the last word. Note something here, it all depends on what I want to do. If I wanted ultra flexibility, I could have placed each word on its own layer. I consider that overkill, but if you do want maximum flexibility, then feel free to do that. Also, in case I didn't want to change the color of this last part, I could have left everything on one single layer. So nobody can give you a specific, definitive guide on when it's best to create a new one. It depends on what you want to do and how much freedom you want to have in your project. For my 3 hearts, I'll definitely add them on a different layer. In general, separate components should be placed on different layers. This is obviously another element that's not directly connected to my handwriting, so it makes sense we put it on its own layer. Again, a question. Do I want them to be treated as a whole, or do I want to style them individually? If you ask yourself these types of questions, things will go much smoother. Let's go with the latter option. I want to edit them later, but not as a whole. Thus, I'll create 3 different layers. Please note this highlight. This shows you your active layer. When it's time to move to a new one, simply click on it and you'll see that that layer is now highlighted. This means your drawings won't interfere with each other. Please take a moment and rename all layers. Finally, I'll create one last layer for my squiggly lines. Okay, this is a bit random, but it does make my point. Now, through various techniques, I can adjust my work without affecting everything else. I can change this heart's color, but nothing is happening with the other 2. Perfect. I can erase this last word and write something different. This is how you should work with your layers. Use them to gain as much freedom and flexibility as you want. One piece of advice is never leave your layers unnamed. If you want to layer every component individually, then please take the time to rename them. If you don't do that, you'll be in a world of trouble. Now that we have a few layers in our project, it's time we talk about another concept: groups. If you think about your operating system, when you install a new program, you create a folder for it. That's because all those files go together and you don't want them misplaced. It's the same thing in Photoshop. These three hearts are related to each other, so let's group them. Here's how I recommend you do that. You hold down the Control or Command key and you click on their names. Once they're all selected, press Ctrl-G. Now you've just created your first folder. Don't worry, your layers haven't been deleted, they've been moved inside this group. If you click on this arrow, you'll see they're safe and sound. Ctrl-G is easy to remember because G stands for group. If you want to get rid of it, you shouldn't use Delete because that will trash these layers as well. Instead, you should right-click it and this list will appear. Hit Ungroup Layers and you're good to go. And it's the same story with groups. You create as many as you want. In general, you should have at least 2 layers inside, otherwise it doesn't make much sense. But here's what you can do. Create a group for these hearts. Please rename it. Now select everything except for the background layer and group again. Now you have a folder inside a folder. And you can continue with that line, but I'd say more than 3 levels will slow you down rather than help you. These are called nested groups. As you can imagine, by having everything together, it's very easy to reposition them, to edit them in all sorts of ways. It just makes your life easier. Just look at how simple it is to play around with my entire composition. Grouping layers is an essential part of getting the most out of your project. Okay, that concludes this lecture. Go ahead and open this PSD and have some fun with it.